All right, welcome everybody. We are live. This is our Strong Citizens Week webcast, and this week what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the decision to run for office. As a strong citizen, you might be thinking maybe it's time to get more involved to the point of elected office, and so we've got a great panel today. We're going to explore the decision to run for office, and then we're also going to explore what is the role of elected officials, in building a strong town, and why is that important? What we won't be talking about is campaigning. One, we're a nonprofit, so we just don't delve into that, and then two, that's just not really the focus. We're not really interested in this conversation on campaign tactics or elections. What we're interested in is what goes into that decision, between being a community advocate and then taking that step to running for elected office. And then once you're in elected office, how do you do so effectively, and what is the role for an elected official in a strong town? So I'm really excited to introduce our panel. I'm going to start off with we have Mike Bloomberg in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. He's running for the state legislature there. And we have Joe Burgum in Fargo, North Dakota. Joe is running for city commission in Fargo. We have Michael Kovaks, who's a city manager in Fate, Texas. And so I was really happy that Mike joined us so that we can have a staff perspective. I thought that would offer a really nice perspective to this conversation. And then last but not least, we have Kathryn Trauger in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, who is a councilperson there. And I'll let everybody go around and introduce yourself, and I'll go from the reverse order I just started. So, Kathryn, if you want to give us a brief introduction. And actually, before I do that, I should do some quick housekeeping. So we will be recording this. It'll be on our YouTube page. I'll send around a link. You'll see a chat icon that you can use if you want to chat with other members of the webinar. I also put some troubleshooting tips. Two quick ones are if you're having trouble with the screen reception, if it's a little fuzzy or anything, there is a YouTube icon, like a little gear you'll see, and if you click on that and switch to the HD setting, you should get much better screen quality. And then the other thing, every once in a while, the webinars on air program will sort of stall out. If that does happen, just refresh your browser. If you're really having trouble, try to change browsers. Sometimes this can be really finicky, especially with Safari. So without further ado, yeah, Kathryn, if you'd like to give us a brief kind of intro, and we'll just go around the horn.
I will be brief. Thank you, Jason, and it's great to be with everyone and be here talking with everybody. I'm a fairly new city council member. I've only been at this for a year, so you will get some sort of fresh perspective on running for office and what it takes. I was on the Planning and Zoning Commission for about 6 years prior to my decision to run for office, and I was chair of that commission for 4 years. And I have just been an advocate. I blog at our town, Glenwood Springs, and so it just seemed like a natural thing to move into city council and into an elected office. And I can talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. I do live in Glenwood Springs. We're a town of about 10,000 that sits right between Vail and Aspen. And we are mostly tourist-based. We are in a very narrow valley. And I was hoping to show you guys some slides that would kind of prove what I was talking about, but due to a little glitch, I think I probably won't do that. So, but I'm excited to be here and with everyone. My day job is I work for a little nonprofit, brand new nonprofit called Community Builders, and we are all about building strong communities, vibrant communities, sustainable communities, in the American West. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathryn. And I was remiss here. Thank you for the panelists. I think I did that, but I may have forgotten to thank all of you for joining us, which is really important. Really appreciate everybody for joining us. Michael, if you want to go next, and I think I might have muted you. If you want to unmute yourself and you can give us a brief intro. Tell us what you're doing in Fate. That would be great.
Great. My name is Michael Kovaks. I'm a small-town city manager. I've been in local government for about 18 years, and I have a little map for you. We're going to try and share the screenshot here. And how does that? Can everyone see that?
Not yet. There we go. Oh.
Okay. So this is Dallas, Texas, Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area, almost 8 million people. And we are a little town. We're in the wealthiest county in Texas, just east of that area, and our little town is booming. We are somewhat of a. Am I back?
Yep.
So we were created out of sprawl, and we're now in full-on sprawl repair. We've got a few years until our infrastructure goes, so we know we got some time to do this. So we're working on a comprehensive plan. It's been completed and adopted. And it essentially creates, the plan is to create an urban core around the interstate, which will then sustain the neighborhoods. We're going to leave our north pretty well rural and undeveloped for green space. And then we'll try to take care of our existing neighborhoods, bolster them and unite them with trails and try to get some sustaining value so that they don't go down the hill. So I've been doing this for a little while. I was in Galveston helping with hurricane recovery. I was city manager there and other little towns all around America. Including Park City, Utah, as assistant manager, which was a lot of fun. Great skiing.
Yeah, that's a cute town. I was there last year. And then what's your structure, Mike and Fate? How many council or commissioners are you working?
We have 7 council members, including a mayor, and it's a council manager form of government. I'll talk a little bit about the difference between mayor, council, and council manager, and how that affects our roles.
Okay, perfect. Okay, Joe, you want to go?
Sure, happy to. My name is Joe Burgum. I'm calling in from Fargo, North Dakota, my hometown and the center of the universe in a lot of ways for the work that I do. Fargo is a city about 110,000 people. I'm surrounded by 2 other mid-sized cities, which creates a metro population of close to 200,000 people. We're the biggest city in 200 miles, so we're a real large economic engine for the area. I grew up in Fargo, left for undergrad and grad school, and then when I moved back, was really driven by curiosity of how cities work. I'd been studying urban design and community building and wanted to understand what drives a city and how does urban design play a role in that. Fargo's fortunate to have a fantastic urban core. Our downtown is incredibly vibrant, very historic in nature with some surrounding core neighborhoods. But in the last 15, 20 years, like many mid-sized American cities, we've experienced pretty severe amount of sprawl. And the thing that I think is interesting, and I'm a big fan of strong towns, even in the last 5 years, there's more and more information around the economics of cities, but Fargo has managed to pour jet fuel on the growth. So we continue to grow outward in an uneconomical way. For me, in my work, my day job as a community builder, we spend a lot of time looking at culture and what drives culture within communities. And there isn't really that much of a difference from our downtown than from, say, what's called 45th Street. Other than downtown is 2 lanes with parking on both sides, and 45th Street is a 6-lane strode. And so we talk a lot about how culture is driven out of the built environment, and that's really where my curiosity and passion to run for City Commission is. We work with a weak mayor, so we have a council of 5 as the mayor, and then have a city manager.
Great. All right. Thanks, Joe. And Joe's down the road for me. So I've had a chance to work with him and see what he's done. He's done some. If you're ever looking for some creative events or some creative ideas for placemaking, he's your man. Him and his crew down there have done some cool things. Pop-up waffle shop, alley fair. Just some great stuff. Of course, getting a farmers market started downtown. So some really good placemaking down there.
We have a lot of fun not asking for permission. So we've done a lot of events in our community that we believe have really pushed kind of the urban environment and been able to do things outside of the bureaucracy, which creates for a lot of fun and creates a lot of energy and movement.
Exactly. And it'll be interesting to get into the discussion later because now you're running for office. All right. Mike, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name is Mike Bloomberg, the poor Mike Bloomberg. I know I've heard there is another one. I'm running for the state legislature here in Massachusetts. So I'm in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. It's the town I grew up in, and I don't need the map. Essentially, here is Massachusetts, here is Boston, here is Pittsfield. And so we are all the way on the other side of the state. It is a former industrial town. It was former GE headquarters for their transformer division. So it had 59,000 people in the 60s and 70s. And again, like many other towns, because of that, was a huge victim of sprawl in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so it ended up having a built infrastructure for somewhere between 75 and 80,000 people. General Electric left in about 1970. And since then, the city's median family income is now $25,000 below the state average, and we have 42,000 people who live in the city. And so, yeah, it's 42,000 people making less money, but trying to sustain an infrastructure of about 60,000. And so, my background is I was involved in local politics and ended up going to the University of Massachusetts and studied political science. Like most people who study political science, I found my way into a job that actually I needed to find an actual job, and I ended up doing some planning out actually in Colorado. So I've been to Glenwood Springs, Colorado Springs for the U.S. Olympic Committee, and then ended up in New York City working in finance for about the past 3.5, 4 years. I came upon Strong Towns about almost about a year ago now, and was fascinated by actually something that Joe mentioned earlier, which is the economics of density, the economics of the built environment. And just over the past few months, thinking about how that presents itself, how that's presented itself all around the country, and especially how that presented itself in my hometown, I decided to move back to Pittsfield and run for the legislature here in Massachusetts.
You know, Mike, that's perfect. You kind of segued into the question I wanted to ask right away of everybody was, well, Michael, a little bit less of you since you're in city management, but for those running, who have run, what came into that decision to run for office? And what were you doing previously, and what motivated you? Kathryn, do you want to talk about what got you, what spurred you to decide to run?
Well, there are several things actually. My father was quite involved in local affairs, and he was on the local planning commission, and was actually, when Colorado had a state planning commission, he was asked by the governor to be on that. And that was a long time ago, so that's been many years. But he was sort of a good role model, so it was sort of natural for me to want to go ahead and get involved in my town and become part of what was going on. Interestingly enough, one of the catalysts for running for office was when Chuck Marone brought his Strong Towns message to Glenwood Springs, and that was I believe it was in 2014 that he came, and he had a fairly good size group that came to see him, and his message resounded with many of us, including me. And so that made it sort of easy for me to go ahead and decide, well, maybe I should be more involved than I am now, and it was truly kind of a turning point. So I sort of started gearing myself up to make this run and make a difference. And then what also helped is actually people asked me if I would go ahead and run, and to they liked my blog, they liked what I was saying, and they said, I think you ought to do it. And so those were some of the main reasons. You know, I feel strongly about the Strong Towns message and of accountability and fiscal responsibility, and so that was part of the platform that I ran on. I ran on three words that I used in my campaign, and they were strong, connected, and community. So
nice. Well, you know, it was interesting to hear you say that, you know, people were asking you to run. I had a friend tell me once that you should not run for office unless you're asked to run. So it sounds like that was the case for you. I was going to ask you, Kathryn, I know you had a blog. You know, you still do have a blog, but
right.
You know, you were blogging before you ran. What role did that play? I imagine that kind of helped you get your ideas out and maybe expose you to the community. Can you talk a little bit about the blog?
It did help, and actually, I started the blog because we are building currently a $10 million. Well, let me back up. First of all, our main street is a state highway, so we are one of those. Our community is bisected by State Highway 82 and actually Interstate 70, as well as two rivers, the Colorado River and the Roaring Fork River. So our existing bridge is about 63 years old, and it was in need of repair. The lanes are too narrow. It was not built for the weight of vehicles that we have now. So we are currently in construction for a new bridge. But this was a really controversial item in town. We had another group of people who, rather than building a new bridge, wanted to build a new 4-lane bypass right along the Roaring Fork River. And so I got involved and decided to start blogging basically because of that, because I was hearing a lot of false information and incorrect assumptions, and so I decided to go ahead and start trying to set the record straight, if you will. I mean, it was less my opinion and more just trying to bring facts to people, and I do think that played a part in getting my message out there even before I even knew I wanted to be involved. So
sure. That's probably part of the reason maybe some people asked you as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Joe, you want to talk about, you know, your very recent decision to run, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, recent announcement. I think been thinking about it for quite a while, actually. So I kind of fell into urbanism and city design through event planning. So as Jason mentioned earlier, we put on an event called Alley Fair where we took over an alleyway in downtown Fargo and transformed it for a day with food, music, and art, bringing a festival environment to an overlooked space. And did that just as an event planner, as someone who enjoyed hosting fun parties, and realized it was really an exploration of placemaking and creating urban spaces for people to enjoy in the built world. That transitioned into my grad program, where I really got to dive into city design and then just a curiosity and research and learning, and there's so many good resources online now to learn about good urban design. And so when I moved back to Fargo, I was really curious as to what drove the city, so I just started attending public meetings, as many public meetings as I could possibly attend. And I realized a couple of things. One, the city was really accessible. The meetings were open. They were happy to have people come. They were willing to listen to what I had to say. But the other thing I realized is that not many people have the time to show up in the middle of the afternoon or have the desire to sit through a 2-hour-long meeting on public works evaluations. And so that really made me realize that I really enjoy the work and want to work within City Hall, but there's also a gap in terms of how the city operates in the 21st century with the community and how it's sharing information. And then back to this understanding of the economics of cities, where really driven by this kind of notion that I feel like in Fargo we're having a conversation that is perceived as preferential. You know, some people like living in an urban area and some people don't, and that's what we're talking about. And I think right now that's happening because our most vibrant area is an urban center. It's our downtown. But we have great residential neighborhoods that don't have tall buildings and don't have the same sort of activation in the busy streets. You know, they're calmer, but they're still economically viable. Whereas the new neighborhoods that are being built in Fargo aren't economically viable. And so it's really shifting that conversation from being about, well, I like this and you like that, to say, no, it's not actually about what we like, it's about the economic viability of the city. And hopefully we can find something for everybody within a city that works. And Fargo historically had a density of 13 people per acre, and that was in the 1950s, and now we're down to 4 people per acre. And so we've really, really dropped off in terms of the density, and as many of you may know, that's going to affect the bottom line of the city in terms of how we're able to fund things. So it's that funding and the urban design that really kind of pushed me over the top, that said, hey, we got to get this figured out, or we're not going to be a sustainable city.
Great. I think that conversation you're having in Fargo is just tremendous. So I applaud you guys for that down there. Michael, do you have anything to add in Pittsfield about? I mean, you kind of talked about it in your intro about your decision to run. Do you have anything you want to add in there?
I would just say that it doesn't happen if we're not all putting our foot forward on it, and so it is huge to do it as someone involved in the community, as a strong citizen, and there are many ways to do it from the private sector as a public employee. But if you are thinking about it, I would just go out there and start talking to local folks. I think Joe did the right thing. Just start going to the local meetings, and you get to meet some folks. And the sausage is not pretty in local government. And so, yeah, I would dig your hands into it, because it's about, for me, it's about giving people like everybody in this chat and everybody on this panel the opportunity to actually drive that change that we're looking for, and that is necessary at the sustainability level. So, yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Michael and Fate, maybe not, since we're talking about sausage making in local government, maybe you want to chime in here and just talk about your role as a city manager, and also, you know, how that relates to elected officials, right? You know, how can you help elected officials do their job best, and then how can elected officials help you do your job?
Great. Yes, so my role as a city manager in a council manager form of government is essentially you are like a CEO reporting to a board, and basically I've got hiring and firing authority of all the department heads and the operations. We bring policy recommendations to council, and it's a pretty professional type system. Definitely, folks, if you're in a city with a mayor council form of government, your mayor is going to be a full-time mayor, and that's got its own challenges. It's got some really good strong points. You can get movement a lot quicker, but the mayor has to kind of also sell the council and bring them along. So definitely council manager form of government here, and I can talk a little bit about next about kind of how do we get the most from one another. So the first thing I would hit on is definitely it's a spirit of teamwork, and the way you do that is free flowing of information. A lot of the older type systems, you've got people that they hoard information or they keep information from one another. I think that also works with as far as opening things up. That helps everybody. If you're a candidate, if you're sitting in office, I think everybody benefits from a good dialogue with facts and things that you can put out there, and we make the best decisions sometimes by listening to people that we don't agree with to help us out. So definitely a teamwork spirit between the council and the staff members, and then it helps that with talking about those different roles, that the elected folks, they do their very best to respect the roles that the staff has to play, and the staff also has to respect the role that the elected officials got to play. So we have a saying in local gov and in many other places too, other governments, that the elected policymakers decide kind of the what, where we're going, what we're supposed to be doing, and the staff decides what the how, how we get there once the elected folks set the direction. I always like to say that I'll trade you a little bit of the how if you give me a little more of the what. So it is also our job to make good suggestions. What I found in city management is that there's not a lot of people that know about the strong towns philosophy. We kind of have it in our back of our mind. We know that density pays more than sprawl, but a lot of times we are hitting objectives and hitting targets that are short-term in focus. So we'll talk maybe a little bit about that later. Some other advice for folks that are looking at being council members, who are council members. This is kind of kooky a little bit, but I talk about with all my folks having a kind of a family attitude. So, you said you can pick your friends, but you can't pick your family. Well, just imagine that we're all in this kind of political family now, and as council members, you may not get along with other people on the council, or there's different members of the staff that are having a hard time getting along with council members or one another. But you do the things that you would do for a family member. You go that extra mile. If there's someone who's offended, you go to them afterwards and say, "Hey, did I offend you? Is there something that we can work on together?" You do things. You try to forgive people and forget about stuff. You always focus on the positive. There's a lot of things going on. We drop the ball a lot of times as staff members, and when folks pick us apart on camera or online, it really can demoralize and disengage the staff, and that in turn makes things get worse. But definitely encouraging us. We get a lot of punishment from every angle. We get it from citizens, we get it from appointed officials on the boards, and we get it sometimes from the media quite a bit. We all take a lot of punishment. So anything that can be encouraging, saying thank you, just kind of like imagine you're the boss of a corporation, and you're a board member, you're a leader, and to be that leader for that team, it's a big deal.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, that's excellent advice. I like the family analogy. We're a political family. Kathryn, you've been in office a little bit now. Do you want to talk about what's your relationship with staff, and what are your suggestions as far as working with staff?
Great question, and actually, just briefly, I'd like to just comment on something that Michael just said too. I think it is important to work closely with staff and to be family. It's not always easy. That's not always an easy relationship. I actually worked as deputy city clerk before quite a few years before I decided to run for office. And so that sort of gave me a little bit of a unique perspective because I know how it feels when an elected official is micromanaging and things like that. So it's a fine line. It's definitely a fine line that an elected official will walk. So. Now, okay, Jason, ask your question again.
Well, you kind of answered. I mean, I just wanted to know, what advice you had for working with staff, and I think you covered it, but I don't know if you have anything else you want to add.
Well, it's hard when you're in a small town like we are, because we know a lot of these people on a personal level, and so it is hard not to cross that fine line and blur that manager relationship. So I do think it's important that we not micromanage and that we respect the roles of the city manager and of staff, and encourage staff to do the same. So.
Sure.
I really appreciate your comments, Michael. I think we often forget as citizens that it is a corporation. I mean, it's an interesting corporation because it's in the public light, but I've had the chance to work with a lot of city officials and work within our city halls, and one of my goals is to have our city hall be the best place in Fargo to work. If we're going to have the best city on earth, then we need to have the best corporate culture inside in terms of what kind of policies do we have, even from HR to organizational structures. And I think just as we're seeing large organizations and legacy organizations like cities takes time to change. But I often sort of sadly point out to people that our city hall in a lot of ways is operating with sort of old best practices of how do you manage people, how do you lead teams, what is HR versus people success, what are the shared values and the culture of an organization. And if you aren't 100% on those, you're not going to have 100% work for the community. So I think that's something that excited to hear you talk in those sort of terms and that sort of methodology, because I think a lot of cities have work to do to become the sort of 21st century corporate organizations that they need to be to run 21st century cities.
Joe, I have to say that I agree with you that I think the culture of City Hall is absolutely critical, and actually that was one of the platforms that I ran on, because if you don't have a City Hall that is there working for the people, and doing with that sort of mindset that they are really working for the people, then it makes it difficult to get the right things done. We've had some issues with processes involving our community development department, and it's not user friendly, and we're trying to move toward a more user friendly city hall.
I had someone share a thought the other day that I thought was interesting. Is all around us we're now kind of conditioned as these 21st century consumers, right? When we call customer service, we expect help, or either free shipping. There's sort of these standard expectations of the environment around us, but we don't have those same expectations for city government, or they haven't reached that sort of level of customer service experience almost. One thing that you even noted in there, that I think is really interesting, we spend a lot of time focusing on policy, and as Michael said, sort of the what of the city. But I think with good culture, there comes a lot of things that are done internally that aren't even policy. That so many decisions and so many small things. It's been beautiful in Fargo. We were biking around downtown. I was like, downtown just needs a good restriping of our roads. That's not a policy decision. I mean, that is a department's head saying, we're just going to restripe the roads downtown because we got to do it anyways, and it can completely change the urban environment, slow down traffic, make it more pedestrian friendly. So those are the things I get really excited about, is the potential to be an elected official to help empower those city staff to make those decisions that don't require a vote at the commission and can have huge impact for the entire community.
I'd be interested, Mike, to hear your perspective on this. Kind of what you anticipate working with staff, and I'm sure you've worked with staff in your career a little bit. But being that you'll be, you're running for state office, you'll be dealing with, people at the Capitol and also people at the local level. So I'll be interested in your thoughts on and anticipations for working with staff.
Oh man, well, so my background before this, I ran our assessment methodology at a hedge fund, and so everything first principle of the hedge fund is everything is about people. And so Joe, when you talk about the ability to make that change at the local level, a lot of it doesn't need to be the legislation. It's about having good people and great people in local government. And so we're all in towns and cities that aren't, Fargo might be 100,000, but we're not the New York City, the mega city. We're not Chicago, we're not San Francisco. And so over the recent trend of so many talented people moving to these cities and want to have an impact on that city, there's a dearth of talent at the local level, which makes it way more way more, I guess, beneficial and important that we have people like Strong Towns members, strong citizens, who do step up into that role. Because if we don't have them in that role, you end up somebody who's just in it and they're doing the job, and I'm sure everybody's experienced in their hometown. They're not doing anything that's enough to get them fired, but they're not doing anything that's really making the city adaptable, that's making the city progressive and moving forward. And so the most important thing, it's with my campaign staff, and it's absolutely at the state level, and in all the conversations I've had with our newly elected mayor and local officials, it's about getting the right people in the positions, because not everything needs to be legislated. In fact, we are over-regulated in so many areas. I'm sure across the board some strong citizens will agree with that. And so if we can get the right people in the right place, that is absolutely critical.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'd be really interested in hearing, going back to you, Kathryn. I'm interested to hear what surprises you've seen since you got to office, and then I'll ask the other two running. What surprises or challenges maybe that you're anticipating as if you're elected and will be in office, and then Michael, you can just tell us some funny stories that you've seen about your elected officials if you want.
Well, first of all, I'm going to just make a comment on what Michael just said about getting the right people in the right positions. I think that is critical. And trying to move beyond status quo. I think that there are a lot of times that there are so many people, and this is elected officials, this is city managers, this is people in local government, people in state government that are perfectly content with things the way that they are, and don't rock the boat, and don't make any changes, don't revise the code, don't update the comp plan, just put it on a shelf and let it be. But as far as surprises, I think I thought I knew how long it would take to get things done, but it takes a lot longer than I would have ever anticipated. And the other thing that has been frankly disappointing to me is which is one of the reasons my blogging has sort of decreased, is the necessity to be so politically correct and not and try not to offend. And I think after a year in office, I'm to the point where it's like, you know what, I have some things that have to be done, and I have some things that I have to say, and I think that they will get said anyway. The other thing is that going back to to land use and to building great places and place value. For so many of our communities, and it goes back to the NIMBYism and the Mayberryisms, that density is really a four-letter word, and we have the only place that Glenwood Springs has to grow, and we're slated to grow, but is through infill, and that's an amazingly challenged to get that actually before people, and to make them understand that you can have density without having block, in our area a 6-story high-rise would be a huge building. But you can build housing, you can build density into areas without having it look like it shouldn't. So
sure.
I think we're facing a very similar thing here too, Kathryn, and maybe others can touch on this, is that the idea of density is Manhattan. This is this image that is like it's Tokyo. You have no personal space, you have no green space, and it is really shifting this dialogue of, our old neighborhoods. I live in a historic neighborhood in Fargo, and we have 13 people per acre in this neighborhood, and you wouldn't even think twice about it, and that's 3 times the rest of Fargo. And so for us, we often say, hey, let's just get back to our historic levels of appropriate density. We're not talking about being Manhattan. We're just talking about to where we once were, which was much more dense than we are now, because we've been able to sprawl. A quote from an interesting blog, and I'll get it to Jason, but it was about development in neighborhoods and how developers and neighborhoods work together out of Minneapolis. And one of the quotes from the article was, "Nothing neighborhoods hate more than the status quo is change," which I think is a very real thing. I'm realizing. I'm the president of our neighborhood association, and also as I run for office. I think the thing that's been surprising for me is the sort of disconnect between the fact that it's a big job interview and the qualifications for the job. There isn't really a rubric for what makes a good commissioner or what makes a good mayor in terms of the skill set or the knowledge base or the passion, and especially in a small town, at least here in Fargo, a lot of it is about, who do people like and who do people know, more so even than, the policy expertise or the preferences. I mean, there's a few issues that people may stand on either side, but that it really is kind of the most unique and in some ways the most bizarre job interview I've ever done, with the 20,000 people that will be voting on June 14th in Fargo. So it's been interesting to see that dynamic, and I'm trying to really engage people in the process and help people understand that in North Dakota, your vote for the president may not make that much of a difference because of electoral college, but at the local level, I mean, we have people win or lose by 100 votes. And that those individuals on the commission are spending real money. I mean, every single day. One of the examples I use to help people understand sort of the quantifying of spending within City Hall is that one large traffic light, a 3-lane traffic light, runs about $250,000. And granted, it'll last, 40, 50 years or more, but, we talk about, sort of our desires and visions for a city. You really need to look at the budget, not the visioning document, to know where a city is going. And so one intersection is, $1 million. And so I've asked people, do you have any ideas for how we can improve our community with $1 million? And that's just one intersection. We had a $130 million capital improvement plan this year for the city of Fargo. And so it's this really those real spending decisions that I get excited about that I think it surprises me the public just doesn't understand. I mean, they experience the public infrastructure and they understand the city is growing, but don't necessarily see how much the city is spending on things.
Joe, that's a really great point. And the budget process is something that I have been trying to turn upside down here in the city. We budget on an incremental budget, and everybody just assumes that it will be the same as last year plus some. So. Yep. And that's not the way we need to be looking at things, and we need to be questioning, the $50,000 for studies that get put on a shelf somewhere and collect dust. So that actually has been a huge thing for me. Glenwood Springs, amazingly enough, is using the same financial software that they put in the mid-1980s. And it was last updated in, I know, in
not
2003.
Acceptable. Not acceptable.
Not acceptable, because the city council can't get reports out. We are doing payroll by hand. This is what I mean. This is status quo, and this is ridiculous. When you look at things like this, that nobody has had the wherewithal to actually go in and question and change, and it's being questioned now, and we are putting in a new financial software system and a new backbone, because we simply can't be sustainable and can't be fiscally responsible with the things the way they are. So.
Well, one of the things that I've been saying in order to kind of rally people, I guess, is before we can rock the boat, we need to build a new one. And that's the game plan. That's what I'm running on is, what is this shared vision of the future? I've often seen in city work, it's easy to do a lot of finger pointing and spend a lot of time looking in the past. How did we get to this point? But as many of you know, and through Peter Block, who is one of my great community building sort of idols in his work and his book, is it is a shared vision in the future. And if we can get people looking forward about how can we make things better, we're going to get a lot farther than spending time saying how did we get to this point, whose fault it is. So
Right.
I think that's huge. And Peter Block, by the way, folks, I definitely recommend checking him out. Also, I wanted to note too that there's a little icon on your screen. I think for attendees, it's on my left side, but I think for attendees, it's actually on your right side. But it should say Q&A or have a little question mark in a quote box. But if you have a question, go ahead and tap on there, click on that, and you can ask a question. Definitely like take some questions from folks viewing. Mike,
Which one? There's two of us.
Mike and I'll start with Mike in Massachusetts, and then
Okay.
And then we'll go to Fate maybe. But what I want to know, so we've been talking a little bit. Also, by the way, funny story. Mike has a Verizon protest, and I think he said another protest going on. So we might hear some horns honking.
Yeah. I've got the noise cancelers on, but I just moved. I have a campaign space. We just moved in about a week ago. You can see it. We've got some local art in here, and I'm right downtown, right in Park Square. And so there are two things to that. One is it really demonstrates kind of how dilapidated our downtown has become. It's seen a bit of a recent revival. But I am paying next to nothing for a storefront right in Park Square in downtown Pittsfield. And so I have a ground floor storefront for my campaign space, 1,200 square feet that I absolutely don't need for a campaign space, but it's an amazing opportunity. But what Jason just said is right out there in Park Square today, we have about 200 people protesting a fracked gas pipeline here in Massachusetts, and there are about 50 who are participating in the nationwide protest for Verizon workers. So if you hear the horns honking, that's what it was for. I was out there earlier, and I'm sure I'll be back out there again right after this.
So one thing I wanted to mention is that I've noticed, the conversation has sort of steered a lot towards a question I had, which was Strongtown's principles. I'm really interested in how all of you are, not only, you've talked a little bit about how Strongtown's principles, sound like they're influencing what you do and even some of your motivations to run. So I'm curious a little bit, maybe expand upon that, but also how you're communicating some of these messages, some of these messages about, where we build and how we build and how it affects our economics. I'd be interested in your take on that. If you want to maybe start us off, Mike, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I just how do you communicate that to the people of the city or the town that you represent? I just had a great letter to the editor here, and one thing that I found was I just took a local business downtown. There's a coffee shop right downtown. It's a building. There's a coffee shop in it, and there's a bar next to it. It's kind of it's a hip coffee shop and a hip bar that just came in within the past couple of years, and it really demonstrates the possibility for creative growth here in Pittsfield. And so what I did is in this letter to the editor, when I talked about urban principles and density, I mentioned that how per square foot that building takes up, it pays its taxes on an assessment on a per square foot valuation of $130 per square foot. And then you go out to, I mentioned one of the shopping plazas in town that everybody knows, and say that that's $16 per square foot. And so you can see the 8x return on it, but you're doing it in a way where you're talking about these local businesses. And so when I say that it's the, where Dottie's and Mission Bar and Tapas are, and they're paying 8x to the city compared to this shopping plaza where there is a Big Lots and a McDonald's, I find that by doing that and relating the principles to what we have here right in our town, just like Chuck does in his curbside chat with Brainerd and with local towns, and using local examples with the strong town principles, people start to get it. So I'm not out there saying, hey, everybody, you got to go read Strong Towns. Well, I am, but I'm not using that to campaign. I'm using local examples, and it registers, and people get it.
Yeah, and I know, Joe, you'd mentioned that too, that local context, talking about density in terms of the neighborhood, right? Not talking about Manhattan. I can't remember, what's that stat? I think Fargo's slated to grow 40,000 people in the next, 30 years, and you could fit it all in the existing footprint and still be under that 1950.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, I think the challenge in a lot of these conversations around sort of the strong towns principles and the information out there is that I think we're just plagued by innumeracy in the U.S. And so even though we can share the data with people, people just don't understand the implications of it at such a large scale. One of the things that we often share, Fargo is about the same size in population to Boulder. Boulder is about 23 square miles in surface area as a city. Fargo just hit 50 this last year. So we're about the same size as San Francisco proper and Boston. Obviously, they have a much higher density, but the fact that we're, same population and twice the surface area as Boulder is a problem. And so it's trying to find those local examples. As I kind of mentioned, right now there's this dynamic where downtown is our best example of a strong towns principles. I mean, a financially viable area that's paying for the streets that it's using and has that high per square foot tax base. Is using examples from other cities. Where people go to Minneapolis often. It's a big city, it's close, but really trying to point out examples of vibrant neighborhoods that could be in Fargo or that could be similar to Fargo. They're at a different scale than our downtown, that are maybe more intimate or more walkable, but they're not sort of that downtown, visits or central business district sort of thing. One of the things that I've been trying to do with folks in our community to help them understand kind of almost through a roundabout way the importance of these principles around smart growth and the economics of cities is our property taxes have been rising in Fargo quite quickly, and part of that is an operational standpoint of the city and how they do it, but property values have been rising. And helping people understand that the only real way to lower property tax, because they've been doing a buyback through the state, which is all pushing cash around, that's not a real lowering of it, is to grow the tax base. If we can grow the tax base and have a larger pie, we can lower the number of mills. And so I think that's the thing where people understand, hey, if we don't build more infrastructure, then we don't need to pay for it. And the tax base can grow and we can have more people paying for a smaller share. So it's really trying to help people understand that economy of scale of a city, and that actually it'll be cheaper for everybody if there are more of us living in the same area. I think one of the big things too that we're sort of dealing with is kind of 1960s, 1950s bad urbanism, and that urban cores were failing, and that cities are dirty, and you don't want to live in the city, you want to live in the suburb. So we're really trying to advocate for more green spaces inside of our city. To me, to think that you have to give up having access to green space to live in a city means you're living in a bad city. They should be tied together. We should be able to live in an urban environment and experience the joys of mobility accessibility. People are beholden to their vehicles in Fargo. It's not their favorite mode of transportation, that's their only option. So creating that mobility freedom and then having those green spaces. If you have to give up one or the other, it's a bad design, not a result of cities, I think.
It's interesting you mentioned the green space, Joe, because I saw a heat map of development in Minneapolis in the last 10 years, and they had more development along their Midtown Greenway than they had along their new light rail lines. And the new light rail lines have been successful, by the way. It's not like those have been failures. It's just, they have a lot of development along those. But the Greenway has actually outperformed them, which is incredible. But yeah, people want that green space.
I'm really excited for cities to continue to be working with development companies and doing planning, because I think they bring good economic perspective. Downtown Fargo is just about to enter a process, or the city is about to enter a process for a downtown master plan, and working with a company that usually works with private development. But for the city to be able to look at data and say, wow, if we invest in a good park, we could see 5 to 20% return on property value around that park, and all we need to do is invest in a green space. The same thing goes with the roads. And I think it's really helping cities understand that you're already spending money on this infrastructure, and if you design it differently, it's going to have a higher ROI.
Yeah, Chuck always calls a street a wealth creation platform. Michael and Fate, I want to hear, kind of how you're communicating these principles, down in Fate, and what insights you have.
Sure. Yeah. We actually started. I started about a year ago, before we even started talking about strong towns or using the videos. But we started talking about things like the cost cost of infrastructure and infrastructure replacement and how long things last. And it took a little bit of time to do that, but we've been educating our council members, and they're great educated folks. They get it, and it's been good. Once they were ready, they had a good background about kind of what things cost. People are amazed at, like you were saying, the $250,000 just a light system. I remember we were doing a light pole, intersection pole, going from the stringy wires that you see kind of coming across the intersection. We were going to go and put in the mast arms. So just the mast arms, and this is a few years ago, it was $80,000 just for the mast arms. People couldn't believe it, but things just cost so much money. But definitely, we used a lot of the Strong Towns videos. We showed the short ones and spaced them apart, and that helped get some of that message out. People really connected. We showed the curbside chat to our planning commission, and had about a 2-hour after discussion on the curbside chat and what that meant and how we're developing. And I think there's a little bit this is a hard lesson. There's a lot of denial that happens, and people kind of want, they want their suburban life, and they think their taxes that they pay cover what they're enjoying, and when they realize that it doesn't, there's almost like you have to take them through the stages of grief, and then bring them out the other side and say, hey, it's okay, but we kind of got to start on our way back, and it's not so much that if you can have a $450,000 or $500,000 house, then the economics sometimes will work, but if you can't afford a house that big in a neighborhood that really nice, then the economics don't work, and we've got to go back to our roots, and creating that type of environment. So it's been challenging at times, but really not with my folks. I think our bigger challenge is going to be in our area around us and how our other cities respond and react to that. And I actually hope they come along with us, and that our entire county can kind of go through this together, and that we're all a stronger community, because we're only about 80,000 people in the whole county, so we need to work together.
Absolutely. Kathryn, do you have anything you want to add as far as you've talked a little bit about using this approach in your community, but any insights on specifically the communication side of it?
Well, I think we're trying to get the message out, basically any way we can. I will just add on to a couple things that have been said as far as economic development and trying to create sustainable communities that are strong and financially stable. The organization that I work for, Community Builders, has a report that it's called Place Value, and one of the findings, well, there are several key findings, but one of the key findings is that jobs follow people, and people gravitate to great places. And so I think what Joe, what you're talking about, in Fargo is spot on. I think if you can create the kind of environments and the places that people want to be, then I think that economic development piece will follow, and you'll have a more diverse economy, and it just it's a stronger place for everyone. So as far as getting the word out, just keeping blogging, keeping after keep repeating the same thing over and over again. I really like what Michael is doing by showing the videos. I think that's a great way to get the message out too.
And by the way, if you go in the chat section, I did post a link to we have a post, we have an article on Michael's work on presenting those videos. That's pretty good, so definitely recommend people check that out. I do have a few questions from the audience that I want to get to. And I want to start with Molly had a really good question. She asked, and this is good because we have some younger panelists too, so you might have some insights for her. But she asked, you know, I'm wondering if any of you dealt with an opponent who did not take you seriously as an opponent, and how do you deal with that or took advantage of that? She's currently running for a city director as a 27-year-old newcomer, and has an opponent that has been on the city board for 24 years. Her response to her announcement was basically, "Oh, that's cute." Who wants to jump in and take that one?
I would love to, because despite this haircut I've got going here, I'm actually 26 years old. I am running against an incumbent here in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. She's been in this position for 5 years, and prior to that was a city administrator, and before that a city councilor. It was the best thing that I had was the first 2-3 weeks of this, where I knew she knew me. We knew each other from having both been involved in the past. But the best thing I had going for me was the fact that she was out there campaigning for Hillary and not campaigning for herself. That's changed, and that changes just by you going out there, having conversations with people in the community, and especially having conversation with other community leaders, because now she's hearing my name not just in town but also at the State House, and it's changed real quick. I actually ran into her earlier today, and people keep telling me now she's taking this very seriously. And so I would use it to your advantage, because I would much rather her prefer to not take this seriously and spend her time doing something else. But the only way to have that change is just by running your campaign. And so that is instead of something that can be a downside, I think that's a huge advantage, especially now in this country. There is a lot of people getting engaged this year, especially in the national election, who want to see some sort of change. And so you see some enigmatic candidates on both sides of the aisle who are able to attract a lot of support, for better or for worse, by talking about wanting to see active change. So I think if you come out with that message, a smart message for change, and talk to people in town, if she doesn't take you seriously, it's to your benefit.
Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead, Kathryn.
Well, I was just going to say, how many years has this person been in office? You know, I think that there is a need for term limits. I think that they serve a purpose, and you know, I would, if I were you, I would just run on as Mike said, a fresh perspective, and you know, just get out there and I wouldn't pay too much attention to what she's saying. I would go and spread the message that you want to spread. So go for it.
The thing that I've been running into, and I'm 22 years old, running for public office here in Fargo, the thing that I've really seen is sort of this question of what qualifies you. Less so than the taking seriously, but what qualifies you over other people. And I often sort of point to the subject matter. You know, in the 21st century, access to information has changed very much than a generation ago. And so it's not necessarily how many years have you been able to go to the library, literally. It's, you know, how many hours can you spend on the computer researching. And so I think for me, it's really pointing to examples of, it's about that sort of curiosity and listening, especially when it comes to some of these public roles, when you're really a board of directors, you know, back to just sort of misinformation. You know, people think that city commissioners have ability to, you know, change and lower property tax with the magic wand and do these things that are affecting markets, or they're, you know, they don't understand it's an advisory role versus necessarily a decision-making role in the weeds. So I think what is the role, what is the job description, and then what makes you qualified based on your abilities and skills that aren't necessarily tied to your age.
Great. I actually Mike, I've got a question for you for Mike Bloomberg. This is from Mike McGinn in Seattle. He says that he knows Pittsfield fairly well and thinks cities like it, these old industrial cities with a good downtown fabric and history will become more popular. Are you seeing any evidence of that so far?
Well, we have seen, I'd say probably in the mid 2000s, so 2004 to 2008, we had a period here both of national economic growth and state economic growth, where there was a lot of state money for downtown and urban development. There was a lot of support from a governor and a mayor here who really did that. So we got a lot of state money, and that coffee shop and that bar that I was talking about downtown have really brought people to make downtown more of a destination. And so 10 years ago, I would have never thought about going to our downtown for anything. And my family owns a store downtown, and it would still never go downtown. We started to see that change, but we've now gotten to the point where money isn't there. The short-term tax incentives have run out, and so short-term changes, and we're looking for sustainable changes and sustainable ways that make downtown investment, downtown living, downtown commerce more sustainable and more attractive. And so I agree with you. I mean, that's why I'm doing this. I'm hoping we can do this here, but as long as we continue to basically subsidize sprawl, and as long as we have policies in the city, Jason and I were just talking about it. There are folks who want to put a Walmart on the old GE property because it's vacant, and Walmart's the only one who has said that we'd like to move there. And so this is a beautiful property, right next to downtown, overlooks the city, that has hundreds of years of history. And if you have people who are considering things like that, my worry is because the built environment is so important, because when you build a building, it has very long-lasting consequences. And so I would rather no growth or slow growth than basically growth, or than decisions that are going in the other direction. So yeah, to get back to it, it's an opportunity, but for every one that does succeed at it, I would imagine that there's at least one more that fails at it. And so that is really why I am running right now. We have a new mayor, new council, and looking for some new leadership at the state level, because we are at that critical point right here in Pittsfield, where we can either go one way. We just hit our property tax levy limit, so we can't raise more money in the city, and so we are very close to going up like that, like Mike out in Seattle is suggesting. But if we make the wrong moves, we will be in a rut for quite a long time. So I hope so, and that's why, especially if you live in one of those post-industrial, beautiful towns, jump in, everybody. I think that's why we're all sitting in this, and so put your name in the ring.
Yeah, I really appreciate that response, because, like you said, it's there's opportunity, but it's not easy. You're certainly not sugarcoating it. The next question, I'm gonna have Michael and Faye. I'm gonna have you start off answering this, and then anyone else can jump in if you'd like. But you sit in a lot of meetings. I figure you probably sit in the most meetings, being a staffer. So I'm gonna let you tackle this one. This is a question from Christine, and she asks, "Now, I attend city meetings and find presentations are long-winded. Any suggestions on presenting ideas and information that are short and to the point? And could the long-winded method be part of this can't be politically incorrect arena city staff sits in?" Yeah, I think some of the times the technology has, in some ways, helps, in some ways hurts. I know we've started in the business now to live stream. We've all got cable television channels. We don't here in Fate, so we don't have that issue, but we're real small. But in other cities, it's pretty common to have live streaming. So sometimes you get some grandstanding that takes place. So people they enjoy seeing themselves on the camera, and they make their point in a workshop, and then they make their point in public and so forth. But sometimes it's a big advantage that people they think about the people at home that may be watching. So that helps broaden
the audience to where it's not just the people that you can see in the audience, that now there's people that are watching with a glass of wine that are interested. They've kind of run across their city commission meeting. Now they're going to watch and see what happens on a street issue. I think we definitely need to help shorten from a staff perspective, so we can be more concise. We can use visuals and move through them much quicker. And I think part of that also is just trying to manage the sheer volume of what we've got coming at us, and having that sense of urgency, and really working with the mayor or whoever's leading the meeting, that they get the mayor-manager relationship's real critical, making sure that we're coordinated and bringing that kind of a sense of urgency. And possibly, we'll see the use of technology, maybe some social media in some ways. We don't have that quite yet, but there's the future can bring a lot of things too.
Great. Does anyone else want to address that?
I'll jump in just briefly. I think that I would agree with Michael that it is that it can be a case of grandstanding. We have there are certain people that come, that in a small town we get presentations from the same people over and over, and it's like you kind of cringe when somebody comes in because they're known for being long-winded. We actually have initiated a time limit for staff presentations. Because we were finding those were getting very long-winded, and we have the information, we get it electronically ahead of time, we should be reading it, and so we have asked staff to shorten their presentations to 6 minutes, and that's been really interesting because we end up getting the executive summary of what they're presenting, and a lot of times we don't need the fine detail of everything. So that's one way that we've taken to sort of shorten that. Of course, we also request that public comment be kept to 3 minutes, but there are times that you really need to just go ahead and listen to what people have to say. So
this is a process question for Kathryn and Mike, and I feel like we could do an entire another webinar just on policy of cities, because I just think this is so interesting. Do you do sort of brown bags before your commission meetings, or alternating? I really find that our commissions, there are very few organizations that operate sort of in a glass box on a stage where they're being given information and you have public input, which is new information, whether it's factual or not. They're trying to make a decision. And often there's a lot of dialogue that doesn't happen between when the agenda goes out on Friday and when the meeting is on Monday night. So I've heard of some cities doing sort of alternating from their main commission meetings, sort of in informational meetings. Do you do anything like that, or how do you get your elected officials the information they need so they can make decisions not in this weird kind of public silo?
Yeah, we do. Our city council meetings last almost all day, by the time, because we start in the morning and we have what we call a pre-meeting. It's an open public meeting, but we talk a little bit about some of the items on the agenda, and that way we can see if we need an additional piece of information from staff, or if we know it's going to be contentious, something like that. We've got a little bit of a heads up. As far, and you're mentioning that things are operating in silos. I think that's a really good point, because we are trying to meet with all of our boards and commissions on a regular basis, and we do those in a work session. That's usually in the morning or immediately before the evening meeting. So, yeah, there are a couple different ways to handle that, but I'd stress that they all need to be open and public meetings, because transparency is a huge thing, and we want to make sure that the public. And all of ours, our work sessions, our pre-meetings, everything is live streamed and televised and archived. So.
Okay, and maybe I'm not the best city to illustrate this because we're a very small town. We've got about half the tax rate of a normal city our size would have, and so we've got a very limited level of service we provide. But actually, we do not have work sessions. We meet every other week for about 3 hours, and we've at this point had a little golden age happening where all of our council members are fairly united. And they're in touch with the public. They do a ton of social media. We've got a very young populace. The average age is 32 or 33. Lots of people with kids and young families. So they communicate actively on social media with the council members. And when the council members show up, they've got plenty of citizen comments. They've read all their materials, and we actually fly pretty fast. So I think what's happening with us is it's actually taking place way outside the regular process, and because we've got that latitude and that kind of information coming in, we don't spend a lot of time doing workshops or extra meetings. We do retreats occasionally, but we do have that nice touch and that filter and that feed coming continuously from our elected officials, and we communicate a lot at the staff level with our electeds.
I think that engagement and that back and forth between the electeds and the community is really critical. And we can't always expect people to come to us in city meetings. I mean, that's ridiculous. We need to go out to where they are, and engage them on whatever level, whether it's social media, whether it's going to the local pancake breakfast or the local farmers market, and just being available to talk to people. I think that's really important.
It's really validating, Kathryn. I just wrote a blog post on community engagement and civic engagement, and in shifting that paradigm of expecting the public just to come to the city. Right. Well, if there are any other resources, maybe we do an entire webinar on organizational structures, because I do think it's really important, back to those things where it's not even a policy decision, it's really the organizational being. And Fargo's grown so quickly that I think a lot of our practices, I mean, our commission meets every other Monday for about 3 hours, and they don't have the sort of public working meetings amongst the commission. And I think that's one of the pitfalls of sort of how we're structured is you have this leadership team of 5, and if you were in a privately held company, they'd be meeting with the CEO and the C-suite, and they'd be doing a retreat and setting a vision for the year. But every time the 5 of them are in a room, they're having to vote on something, and sometimes they don't want to talk to each other. So it is that sort of that challenge of how do you create a shared vision and operate as a team whenever you're in front of the public, all you're doing is voting. Right. So appreciate the insights on both of those, Kathryn and Mike.
And I think that shared vision is really critical. I would agree with you.
I got one more question I want to get to, and then I think I'll give you some closing thoughts. We're about to 12:30 Central, so I want to respect people's time. But the question is from Molly. She's asking, how do you go about fighting for more inclusive and connected cities without making neighborhood associations angry? Sometimes neighborhood associations can be a bit of a barrier, or they can be an ally in change. So I don't know if anyone has any experience working with neighborhood associations that would want to, Joe, you're on one. Maybe you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can touch on that sort of briefly here and let the others share. Our neighborhood historically has done a lot of work around historic overlays. Just recently, our neighborhood switched from being an older, aging demographic neighborhood to people moving out, and the elementary schools have doubled in size in terms of attendance. And so really this revitalization, but a lot of the energy is that NIMBYism, the not in my backyard. And so my goal as the president of our neighborhood is to be the YIMBY neighborhood, the yes in my backyard. And I think part of that is really about bringing the fun. I think even no matter what team it is, whether it's within City Hall or within the public, people want to show up and have fun. I mean, they're not going to come to be, well, often people come to be angry about public meetings, but if you can get people to engage in something that's exciting, there's a different energy about it, and having it be more social. So we've really shifted our neighborhood association to be focusing on those neighborhood connections and what's within the power of the neighborhood, and really unifying a message around the level of service the city is providing. So I think there's a lot of things that neighborhoods can be frustrated with, but the unified message we've been trying to have amongst all our neighborhoods is let's just increase the conversations between City Hall and these neighborhoods, and then also how we engage with neighborhoods in public meetings. I've been trained in a process called the art of hosting, and really see it as the 21st century town hall. Normally when you have town hall meetings, you have 10% of the people there speaking, and 90% of the people walk home frustrated or angry or upset they didn't speak or didn't like what was shared. And so when we host public input gatherings or events for the neighborhood, our goal is to have as many voices enter the room as possible. And part of that is changing the structure of the meeting. And that really changes the energy, because when people are heard, they're much more likely to be listened to. Oh, Jason, you're muted.
Yeah, I just realized I'm muted. Anyone else want to weigh in on working with neighborhood associations?
I will just say that I've heard, and I really don't have any other insight, I have heard that neighborhood associations can be much tougher than actually city councils and many other organizations. So good for you. That sounds like you're on the right track.
Well, I think what I'll do now, we're in the last few minutes here. I think I'll just go around the horn. I'd be really interested in hearing some closing thoughts from everybody. Mike, I'll start with you, and Fate, if you want to kind of give us some closing thoughts or insights.
Yeah, definitely. I think we talked a little bit about how, as you're thinking about running for office, at the staff level, what we're looking for is, we really, we don't really want to run the place, even though sometimes it looks like we want to run it. We definitely have our own ideas of where we like to see the organization go, but really we want good leaders, and we want people who will lead the city, who will stand up for us when we're doing the right thing, and talk to us in private when we're doing the wrong thing. And someone like our gentleman who's running for state rep, who can cultivate those relationships and be that person that everybody's talking about and help lead that change. We definitely want people that'll listen to us, even if they don't agree with us, and roll around in their head a little bit, and even if they want to go a different way, help us understand why they're going that way, and make it easy for us to follow them. And definitely live what you believe. If you believe in integrity, once you're elected, just remember what you ran on, what you stood for. If you don't like cronyism, don't try to get relative jobs. And if you think corruption is bad, then don't try to get your friends' corporations bids and so forth. So I think people, they sometimes change when they get elected, but if keep close to the people, and they'll take care of you. Stick to your values, and work with your staff, and lead your city.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. I'll go with Mike and Pittsfield.
I'll piggyback off the other Mike, and so if anybody is either A, thinking about running, or B, is just looking to get more involved in the community, there's one thing that I have noticed from sitting on a lot of local meetings, and that is, if you are going up and you're yelling in front of an entire room how bad things are going here and how critical it is that we make a change, or we're all doomed, you're not going to be the person that people really want to talk to about anything, because they want to see that optimism. And it doesn't mean we get to avoid addressing those problems, but I think that if you'll find, if you go, you can call up a city official, and if they don't answer the first time, call them again. You can call up a local planning member. If they don't answer, call them again, and sit down for a cup of coffee or go visit them in their office and say, hey, this is just something that I've been learning about. I've been a member of this organization, Strong Towns. Here is how I think it affects the city, and start a dialogue at that level, and work on building that coalition at the city level. And so we have a lot of people who have made some pretty poor decisions in the city of Pittsfield. The truth is 99%, I would say, of all people involved in local and state government aren't doing it for the wrong reason. They're all doing it because they're people like you, people who care about their community, people who love their state, who love their city, who love their neighborhood. And so they are good people. So when you approach them in a way that is not the publicly shaming, but the locally, hey, how can I help you with this? Here's some interesting stuff I know about the city and about economics or about the built environment. Let's work together on this. I think you get a much better response, and because it's not about me, it's not about you guys, it's about results. And so when you think about it from a results orientation standpoint, you just do whatever you can do to get the results we want, which are strong towns, strong communities. So best of luck to all of you. If you have any thoughts, if you live in Pittsfield, is there no? If any, just please keep in touch. Email me, email Jason. All of us, I'm sure everybody on this panel would love to hear from you. And any way I can help you, or we can help each other, it's incredibly important. So thank you all for joining, and thank you, Jason and Strong Towns, for hosting, and the rest of the folks down here on the panel. Thank you for joining me as well.
Thank you, Mike. Kathryn, do you want to go next, please?
Had to unmute my mic. Yeah, I agree with what everyone has said, and I guess in closing, I would just I have what I call beatitudes that I would like to share with folks, and one is be the role model. You never know who you're going to be influencing, so be the role model for how you would like to see things happening and what's going on. Be the visionary. We've talked a lot about having that vision, and I think that's really really important, and it's okay to
Oh, might have lost Kathryn there. Let's see.
She was on a roll.
Yeah, Joe, that's too bad.
Taking notes.
Be the visionary.
Joe, I'm going to have you go, and hopefully we can get Kathryn back.
Are we still there? Okay, sorry. I don't know what happened. Okay, anyway.
Yeah. We were just saying you were on a roll.
Okay, well, I'll try and re-roll, and hopefully that won't go away again. But challenge the status quo. I think that's important. Be part of the solution. It's great to ask questions, get involved, and be more than an armchair quarterback. Get in the game. And also be the bridge. We can't make decisions in a vacuum, and we need to have the right people at the table in order to make these the best decisions and make our communities the best that we can. And so I would say be the bridge, and also be the best leader. Be the strongest leader that you can be, and also, but know how to follow too when that's necessary. So that's it.
That's great. That's great. Joe, go ahead.
I'm going to be using those beatitudes, Kathryn. Next time I get asked what is the role of a city commissioner. I think for me, in closing here, thanks to Strong Towns for putting this on. I've learned a ton from the other panelists here. And one of the things that I love about working within cities, and something that's really, I think, a signature of sort of the 21st century, is open source information. Is that there is so much learning happening here, and we are all across the country in very different towns that are similar in some ways, but we're smaller than most towns people have ever heard of. And so a lot of the work that I see at City Hall is just learning from other cities. Is that you can call somewhere else when you have a policy question, call a different city. Even as a citizen who's been working on policy issues and reform of different business licenses, we just call other cities, and people are happy to share their policy, their books, how do they solve these problems. And that's such a unique opportunity within working within cities. And I think the other thing is create the communities you want to live in. And I think that's kind of back to the beatitudes that Kathryn has. And for me, I don't want to be a city commissioner inherently. I want to live in the best city on earth. And to make that happen, I see it as an opportunity to help be that change within the community. But I also know that win or lose, there are a group of us that are going to continue to do events within the community, continue to do the tactical urbanism, bringing the community together, because it's not dependent. We're not going to wait for the city to make this a city we want to live in. It really is the community and the stakeholders here, and hopefully we can share that message with our elected officials and with the people working within City Hall. Because if you're spending time and energy in a city, you're a stakeholder there, whether it's through your time or your dollars. And so there really is that civic obligation to listen to neighbors and to hear that message of the public. So
I think that's excellent advice. You still need the civic vanguard, and it's a huge piece of it. I want to thank everyone so much. This has been a really good discussion, and all of you as panelists have just added a lot, and I greatly appreciate it. We're gonna have this on our YouTube channel, and it'll be available for members at first, and then eventually we will have it available for everybody. So we'll do a post on it probably in about a month. But I'll get that link out to everybody. Really appreciate it. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Thanks for our panelists. Look forward for some more webcast announcements. There will be some more coming up that I'm pretty excited about. So stay tuned for that. And thank you, everybody, again, for joining us. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, everyone. Right. Good job. Thank you, everyone.
Feel free to share emails, contact.